Thank you all for coming out tonight, this frigid February evening. A quick announcement. You all have, or should have, the agenda for tonight. It's on the table by the door, as you know. There's one thing that's not, well, it is. It's the first thing that's listed. StanAB text amendment hearing. We're going to do that now. Hopefully it won't take more than about 15 minutes, more or less. And then we'll go into the regular business of the evening. Council?
Yes, scrambling, but Rick, this is an advertised public hearing on the application of StanAB. What's the technical name of that?
StanAB LP.
StanAB LP, thank you. And we will open that hearing by marking a copy of the advertisement that appeared in the newspaper on February 4th and February 11th, 2015, giving notice of a public hearing this evening for the Board of Supervisors to consider an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance to permit apartments as a conditional use in the BP Business Park zoning district and amending certain area and bulk design and parking requirements related thereto, repealing all inconsistent ordinances or parts thereof, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date. That exhibit will be marked as Exhibit T for Township 1. At this point, is there anybody present? I believe Mr. Jarris is present to make a statement to the board as part of the public hearing. Mr. Jarris?
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Sander.
Here comes your...
We want to hear
I would like you to
turn...
I'd like you to wait
One of those I start singing.
for this one. As I come around and you're acknowledged by the board, I'd like you to give me the time to get there.
Thanks.
Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, and members of the board, John Jarris, on behalf of the applicant, StanAB LP, equitable owners of the Blevins and Winters tracks here in the township. With me this evening are the two principals of StanAB, Tony Stancato to my left and Vic Abdallah in front, and also our planner Ray Ott from Ray Ott and Associates, who has worked closely with us on this application. Also our architect on the project, Mr. Vic Barr, is not able to be with us this evening, but he is part of the development team. Just by way of some background, the property that my clients control, the Blevins and Winters tracks, comprise approximately 14.5 acres. The property is located just to the north of Miller's Hill and to the west of the Exelon corporate offices. The property is presently zoned BP, Business Park District, with a small portion at the top of Miller's Hill, Zone C Commercial. And if I could just put that, to give everybody who's not been following this an idea of where the property is located. My clients propose to develop or build a 175-unit apartment building on the property with associated amenities, parking, and landscaping. Public water and sewer are proposed to service the property. We began meeting with the township back in May of last year to discuss our plans to develop the property for this use. We met with the Township Planning Commission, its subcommittee, the Township Comprehensive Plan Review Committee, as well as the Township Supervisors. The current zoning on the property does not permit apartment use. We therefore submitted a petition for text amendment to the Township Zoning Code back on November 25th, 2014 to propose adding apartment use to the BP Business Park District as a conditional use, along with suggested area and bulk and design standards. That petition was amended on December 22nd, 2014 after receiving comments from the Township Planning Commission as well as the County Planning Commission. The County Planning Commission offered its written recommendation to the Township by way of letter dated December 16, 2014. The Township Planning Commission offered its recommendation to the Board of Supervisors at its meeting on January 6, 2015, to approve the text amendment with a suggested revision, which was made to the Board of Supervisors. If in fact the Township Supervisors act to adopt the text amendment, it will not automatically permit the proposed apartment project on the property. And by that, I mean it will require, number one, the filing and processing of a conditional use application, which, after review by the township consultants and a recommendation from the Township Planning Commission, will then be subject of an evidentiary hearing before this Board of Supervisors. Assuming that results in a conditional use approval, then second, the developers will then have to file a fully engineered land development plan application for review and processing by the township and its consultants. This evening's text amendment hearing was properly advertised as referenced by Mr. Sander at the beginning of the proceeding. Copies of the proposed text amendment were made available for review and copying at the township building, the Daily Local News, as well as the county law library. We're here this evening, after all the requisite advertisement and the convening of this hearing this evening, to ask the Township Board of Supervisors to consider and therefore adopt the proposed text amendment this evening so this project can move forward. As stated, gentlemen, we do have the members of the team with us here this evening in case you, the supervisors, had any questions with respect to the text amendment or any of the development proposed related to that proposal.
Board questions for Mr. Jarvis?
Not for me, thank you.
Dr. Lev?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Then we'll turn it over to public comment. Any public comment? Here's one.
My name is Art Kaiser. I live on 109 Young Avenue. I face this development. So I rise in, I'm going to read from my notes if you don't mind. I rise in opposition to amending this township ordinance requested by the applicant and supported by an incomplete sketch plan. It's incomplete because there's no sight line, no side view plan. There's no analysis of the unique topographical characteristic of this land. It's on top of a hill. It has a steep incline. The building is plunked right on top of the hill. There's no community-wide discussion about the trading of the height and the length for putting dimples on the building. This was discussed in the Planning Commission, where the Planning Commission suggested that they could have a larger building by putting dimples on the facade of the building. And now we have new terms to worry about. We got steeples and cupolas, we got mechanical. We have trouble enough about height in this community, about how do you define height. Now we have to define steeples. And you know, if anybody's been listening to the news in Philadelphia, you have church steeples, which now are being proposed to cover cell phone towers. So, you know, you could put a cell phone tower maybe in the steeple. Then you start arguing about how do you define mechanical. Kind of crazy, kind of schizophrenic way of trying to do something by changing the ordinance. You know, we have a culture in this town, working with an ordinance, then looking at plans, and using the ordinance as guidelines. Then the community can start, you know, deciding and analyzing the proposal. I see no reason why we have to reverse that and change the ordinance and then start considering the proposal. I'd be delighted to look at the proposal, but I don't see any reason why we have to start changing an ordinance in order to then consider a proposal. This is a lousy precedent to set for this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, does the board wish to make a motion regarding the enactment of the ordinance?
So I'd like to move to enact the ordinance.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes 2-0, the ordinance is enacted. That'll close the hearing. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And thanks to all who came out with regard to this, so that we could follow through in the proper course of things. Okay. The next item on the agenda is a review of the minutes from January 21 and from February 4. Do we want to deal with both of them at the same time?
I read them both this time,
And you were at those?
and I was at both.
Okay. Would you care to make a
I'd
motion?
like to move to accept the minutes of January 21st and February 5th.
I'll second it. Are we in favor of it? Yes.
Yes.
I'm in favor. Okay. So the minutes have passed. The next item on the agenda is a presentation on sidewalks and trails map.
Everybody, you want over here, it's up on the screen, but it's, it's a little hard to
Chief.
see over there.
Thank you.
Could you show the lights, are they on over there? No, they're not on over there, they're not.
They are?
Still hard to see.
Yeah.
Is any bigger than anything?
Well,
Should be easier to see.
probably.
Put the light on here.
Just that one.
We need a
Okay. This is the Kennett Township Trails and Sidewalks map. We started a Trails and Sidewalk Committee, I think it was back in July. And so one of our first tasks, and I am part of this committee, one of our first tasks was to create a Trails and Sidewalks map. The map includes existing trails, and some of them are regional trails such as the Mason-Dixon Trail. Some are township borough trails, some are trails that are owned by the Land Conservancy, and some are HOA trails, which are private, and they're within developments. We also have existing public sidewalks and private sidewalks, such as Victoria Gardens has private sidewalks, and then Longwood Crossing has public sidewalks. It depends what type of road they're on. If they're on a private road, then they're private. We also have on this map proposed trails that we know will be going in soon, whether they're going to be township-owned, Land Conservancy-owned, or HOA trails. There's, on here we have all of the HOA trails listed out by the development. We have the Land Conservancy trails listed, and then township and borough trails. So the committee worked with Tom Committa, who is our landscape architect on this map, and this is our final map. We waited until we got all the drafts done, but it is our final map. We're going to put it up on the township website. It'll be downstairs here. Anybody's welcome to come up and check it out, or come into the township office and look at it, but it is a really good map. Does anybody have any questions on it?
Lisa, do I assume that if it's an HOA trail, that the HOA is responsible for maintaining?
Yes.
Okay. How do we find out if a trail is HOA or township owned?
I could tell you.
Because there's a trail that goes along the eastern edge of Victoria Gardens, between Longwood Crossing and Victoria Gardens, and I frankly don't know who owns it. I don't think we do, we Victoria Gardens.
Well, Longwood Crossing has trails other than,
So that
there's,
may be
I
yours.
believe that it's Longwood Crossing, because if you look on this map, it's up here. I don't know if you want to come up here and look, but there's a purple line that goes around that shows the trail that goes right up against Victoria Gardens, and that's Longwood Crossing.
And if they don't maintain it,
Well, it depends how they're supposed to maintain it. Some trails in HOAs are just natural trails.
Okay.
We would have to look in the HOA document. If they're not maintaining it, then we can address it with them.
okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Richard?
Yes, Lisa, I just was curious to know, could you approximate the number of miles in the trails, the cumulative?
I can't hear you in the
Oh,
back.
no problem. Yeah, just a quick question. Could you approximate the number of miles of trails and sidewalks in that whole, that map area?
Well, the entire map area, we tried to estimate it, and we believe with the new sidewalks that are going in, it was about 25, approximately.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Lisa, to clarify, that's 25 miles, approximately 25 miles now.
Once the new sidewalks go in for the sidewalk grant.
But as other easements on properties are put into place and additional trails are put in, that's going to increase that 25.
Correct.
Okay.
Do you have an idea how many of those are public versus private and HOAs?
Well, I would say about 60% are private, 40% are public. There's a lot of trails within HOAs.
Question, who's responsible for maintaining the public trails? Yeah, and auto.
It depends which public trail you're talking about. If you're talking about a public trail that's owned by the Land Conservancy,
Yes.
then they are required to maintain it. There are some trails that are owned by the Trails Alliance, so such as the trails down at Pennock Park. Do you know where Pennock Park is on South Street? Well, there is a trail that starts there, across the street from Pennock Park, and it goes all the way down to the Chandler Mill Bridge. That trail is owned by the Trails Alliance, and they will maintain it. The township is getting ready to do a trail easement on the other side of Pennock Park, all the way over to almost to where the Victory Brewing is going in. The township will maintain that trail. So it just depends who owns it.
So maintaining it, is that the same, is maintaining it the same as monitoring it for violations of whatever your rules are for
Yeah.
these trails?
Yes.
So is there some kind of presence of a park ranger or somebody there? So how does it get monitored then?
Well, they go out and do inspections on it, whether it be weekly, monthly. But if there's something going on the trails that shouldn't be, you need to inform the township so we can inform the appropriate people. Because they can't have somebody there all the time.
Would it be appropriate to point out here, Lisa, that the rules and the regulations for the trails, who's going to be maintaining them, and a number of other such questions have not yet been resolved?
That's correct.
So that, if I understand what you're doing correctly, you're presenting the map that acts as our focus of discussions as we continue to look to those issues that need to be further developed.
Yes and no. That the map is our focus point for us to look at the issues for trails and sidewalks. However, the trails that are currently in place, it is whoever owns that trail, whatever agency owns that trail, it is their responsibility to maintain it. And the township has a set of rules and regulations for trails that township trails or public trails are to follow. HOA trails, usually the rules and regulations for their trails are within their HOA document. So each trail could be different, just depending on who owns it. Did that answer your question?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Nancy Hughes, and I have a question then. If the township has standards and requirements and ordinances that govern township trails, and the HOA has its own regulations that were presumably approved in their development plans, what sort of regulations, and particularly to the extent that the township is collaborating with the Land Conservancy on easement trails, so knowing that we might be partnering in the development of these trails, what sort of requirements, ordinances, standards would be imposed on the Land Conservancy trails, given the fact that this is a collaboration using public and taxpayer funds?
For Land Conservancy trails, they will own the trails. We do not have rules and regulations for their trails. The only rules and regulations we have are for township-owned trails. The township has not committed, I know if you're speaking of a particular property, the township committed money for an easement, not for the trails. Now, if the supervisors end up committing money towards the trails, then they may choose to ask to put certain regulations on there. But normally, if the Land Conservancy owns the trails, it's their, it's up to them how they construct the trails, but they also have to work with the county on the construction of the trails because the county also is partners with them on the easement. We don't hold the easement at all. So it's up to the county and, the easement area that they have to work with, and what the property owner wants as well.
Yes, I just would also like to add that I have been on the Land Conservancy website and the Kennett Trails Alliance websites, and I don't see any standards for trails published on their websites. So
I think it depends on the property. I think, because if the township owns a trail, it has to meet certain requirements, aside from what the supervisors would like it to be. But it depends on the location of their trails as well, I think. So I think the way that I don't want to speak for them, but I believe the way that they do their trails is they take it on a case-by-case basis. And maybe the property owner wants it a natural trail, but they normally don't do paved trails. I would think they try to keep it as natural as possible, but it depends on the situation. But you could call them and ask them if they have other specifications for the trails.
So I have another question. Since these trails are public trails, regardless of who owns them, but they're open to the public, does that mean that there can be public events held on these trails that kind of go through the countryside, like track meets and...
Yes.
So these trails that run right next to people's private properties can now have 150 spectators sporting events?
Well, I mean, when you say a sporting event, I think of them setting up stands and, other things for that. And they couldn't do that. They could only utilize the trail. But if say the Kennett High School track team wants to run on those trails or have a run that goes through the trail and it might be part of a competition, they can do that. Just as they can run on township roads if they want. They would be permitted to.
And that's not a spectator sport?
I don't think so. I think
Cross-country.
unless
watch it.
No, you wait at the end for your kid to come in panting.
I mean, the thing, to me, when I think of a spectator sport, like I said, they're standing there on it, on the property, which they cannot do. But they can run through the trails.
So you have a multi-school track meet.
They can use the trails.
So where do they bring all these buses and unload all these kids and all the parents? and all
Well, we
that?
would hope they would go to the school and start, or I know that at State Line Woods, the school has dropped kids off there. I mean, they can't, they have to be able to park somewhere, in legal parking lots, but that would be up for the school to decide how they would get the kids to the trails, but they can't park on private property.
And the only
But the easements are
trail they
private
can
property.
use-
The easements are private property, and the
Right.
trails provide a public thoroughfare through it, but that's 6 feet wide or 8 feet wide with a little overlap on either side.
Yes.
So you'd have a tough time getting the senior class of Kennett High lined up with your cheerleaders cheering them on in that space, I should think. But it's a private space. The fact that State Line puts on events is something that they do in the course of the management of that space, which is essentially their space to do. It's not the same as if there were an easement with a trail on your property that'd be private and that you would manage. And so if somebody is wandering around that is not on the trail, you have a right to have them removed.
Anybody else have any questions?
I just, since this seemed to be a topic of discussion, the police department enforces ordinance and crimes code violations and things of that nature.
You got something to add?
No, I just wanted to make sure that that's what the board of supervisors want. We're directed by you, so it doesn't make any difference whether it's a private right-of-way or it's a public right-of-way. If it's open to the public, they get policed the same as any other right-of-way. Try to relieve people's feelings, I guess, concerns.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments on this subject? Yes.
The Longwood Crossing,
You have to wait for the mic, because I can't hear you.
Kathy Burkett, 818 Williams Lane. When you were talking, Bill was talking about the one in Longwood Crossing. The one in Longwood Crossing, is that loud?
Thank you.
I believe that's a private, they have it marked as a private.
Well, portions of it are private and some are public. The sidewalks are public, the trails are private.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the trails map? Okay. Thank you, Lisa.
Will that be the comprehensive plan?
Yes, it will.
Sorry.
Do you want to take us to manager's report, please?
Roger and I are going to apply for a traffic signal grant, hopefully, by the end of next week. And this grant, if we receive this grant, we will be able to upgrade 3 different signal areas. One is at 5 points. One's at 52 in Hillendale. 52 in Route 1. And the other one's at Kendall in Route 1. And they need upgrades such as new controllers, new boxes, new detection systems. So we're working with our traffic signal company, Charles Higgins, to get this grant application submitted. There are items that we have projected that we need to do in the next couple years. This grant would provide 50% match. We don't know the total yet. We're waiting for Higgins to get back to us, but hopefully, yeah.
Got a quick question. Thank you, Chief. Bob Osterman. Will the light that's at the Kendall, will it be put in synchronization with 52 and 1, so that way when the traffic just gets going, it doesn't have to stop again? I mean, I know they have to recognize that there's a vehicle to come out or to turn left to even activate, but right now it's not in sync, and it creates a lot of traffic problems.
Well, go ahead, Roger, you can speak to that.
That's part of the grant we're going for, is Wavetronics.
I'm sorry. One of the grant items is the Wavetronics detection system that would tie them together. It is putting for that, whether we get it or not, I don't know, but we are compiling all the data for that right now.
And just so you all know, all of the traffic signals on Route 1 and Route 52 are controlled by PennDOT, so they control the timing. We can't adjust any of that. And the other thing PennDOT's working on right now is adjusting the timing at Route 52 and at Hillendale. PennDOT did go out and look at the traffic signal, and they're going to work on that timing issue as well.
So at 5 Points, will it change any of the traffic patterns, or it's really just maintenance? Does PennDOT control that intersection?
They do. Well,
They set
the timing,
Is it the time?
yeah.
Is there any way of upgrading that intersection somehow in the future? Do we have any long-term plans?
Well, there's always a way to upgrade.
We-
I mean, future turn lanes or
Yeah.
stuff like that, but with a 5-point intersection, you're kind of restricted on what you can do for time-wise. It's a limited supply. You can't adjust the time as a short period every morning to a long period in the afternoon. As in, like, the heavy traffic's in the morning. I know everybody's coming from Delaware, and they just can't make it to the light. Well, it's an hour there that just can't be adjusted.
And PennDOT doesn't have any future plans of upgrading Kalen Road at that intersection.
Okay, thanks.
I am working with the Trails and Sidewalk Committee and the Land Conservancy to hopefully apply for a trails grant, which is due in April. It's a matching grant for future trails, so we haven't identified what segments of trails we are going to apply for yet, but we're going to get that grant submitted. At the last meeting, we talked about parking standards. So our attorney did create a parking standards ordinance. It is on the website as a draft. It's being sent to the County Planning Commission and to the Township Planning Commission for their review. And then it will be back before the supervisors at the March 18th meeting. Actually, no, it'll be at the April meeting. And then we also discussed street standards, which would, right now our street standards are 18-foot wide. It would increase the standards to 24-foot wide for new roads. So we created a draft ordinance for that, which is also going to the Planning Commission and the Chester County Planning Commission for their review. But I wanted to bring it up tonight while we have our Public Works Director here, so he could discuss it further with the supervisors, as requested from the last meeting.
All right. So, I mean, when I look at it, it looks like all roads go to 24 feet, the minor arterial feeders, and then all the other ones down into neighborhoods and cul-de-sacs. And I guess one of the questions is, why do those all have to be 24 feet? Can they be graded somehow where in neighborhoods you're a little bit, not 18, but maybe 20, and then the wider one's 22, and then 24 feet on ones where you have an idea that they're feeder roads and have a lot of trucks on them?
The reason for 24 feet that we're looking for is most building standards, PennDOT building standards, all new roads are usually out to 24, 25 feet. It's set up for if somebody does park along the road. Subdivision-wise, I know the new standard is only for new construction, not for any existing road we have. We do try to widen out some of our roads as we repave. We don't go to the we don't want to go to the 24-foot standard because there would be so many right-of-ways that would have to be extended, banks would have to be trimmed, poles would have to be moved. If we can widen the road out, as we have in the Hillendale 3 sections, we've added about 2 feet to it. We're out to about 21, 22 feet now, different spots. Subdivisions are the only thing that's going to be built in the upcoming future. There's not going to be main arteries built through the township. As we ran into in our last house fire that we had in the township, an 18-foot road is not wide enough to pass 2 fire trucks on. We see that with delivery trucks. I know a lot of people don't think that we have truck traffic, but we have at least 4 rounds of buses in the morning. Sometimes there's 5 buses in the same development. Private schools, we have 7 days or 6 days of trash collection, which we have maybe 2 companies at a time in the same development.
it's wearing, it's the edges that I can't hold together. Besides the people, if they park their car, or they put their trash can out to keep their driveway from being plowed shut. That's the only way we can adjust for the future, I see. That's why I picked 24 of it.
Roger, did I understand you correctly to say that of the various standards, governmental standards for road widths, the minimum standard is 24, and some of them are wider yet than that?
Certain towns and certain boroughs or townships pick the standards they want. PennDOT has a standard. I think it's around 25 is what their standard for a new road. They want a 12-foot driving lane on a road, so it's 24, and it leaves you a little bit shoulder.
Okay, thank you.
We have a lot of mushroom trucks too on our back road there.
I can't hear you. I don't know if everybody else can.
There's a lot of mushroom trucks on the road.
Actually, they don't stay on the road. I've seen them go by, yeah. That's the problem, on the edges.
We do have subdivisions that are 24 feet now that were built in the 70s and 80s. It's just that standard they wanted. It makes a nicer drainage. It's easier to keep drainage open. We're not asking for upright curb. We can have swale gutter still, but it's, I guess people are worried that there's going to be a heavy flow of truck traffic now because we have a wider road. I don't know what, I think it'll benefit everybody, just not myself as a road care person.
Are there any other questions for our Public Works Supervisor?
Hi, Whitney Hoffman, just one quick question. I know, like, under the ADA, when you do any upgrades, you have to widen, if you're going to do any renovations to a building, you have to make sure that all the bathrooms are compatible and things like that. So if we are doing any maintenance, is it going to be up to a case-by-case basis where it's your decision on which ones to widen? Like, let's say they're doing repairs on a subdivision road, are you automatically going to try and widen it because it's an upgrade, or just how are those decisions being made, I guess is my question.
Go ahead, I think you can do it. The standards, anytime we do 2 road inspections a year, the supervisors and myself, we have our road plan we try to follow. We're not going out, unless there's a problem where we're having issues of windy, a lot of developers like to build a nice windy road. Well, everybody likes to drive straight, so those spots we try to fix when we're going to put a new surface on. That's the time to address those problems. It is on an individuality, each job, so we don't approach it as we're going to come out and pave your development now and widen it. It's too much money to take on that, unless there's an issue. Intersections are a big issue, radiuses are a big issue, cul-de-sacs are a big issue. That's what we try to address in subdivisions, as in repairing like the islands, those things. But everything goes through the supervisors, so that would be, if I wish, my wish list, then we sit down, we talk about it, and whether or not it's feasible.
Any other questions or comments?
Thanks.
The township and the borough will be applying for an intermunicipal vision partnership grant with Chester County Planning Commission. This grant would, if we were awarded this grant, it would provide us with consulting from the Chester County Planning Commissions to start looking at areas on both sides of the borough that join the township for development. And it's just, right now, it's just a planning grant.
So what does that do versus the individual intergovernmental agreements that we do? What'll that do?
The individual ones that we did were for specific projects.
Right.
This one is that the township, and once the grant's ready, once we're ready to apply for the grant, we will have to set up an agreement, and the township will and the borough will probably have to adopt resolutions for the grant.
Ordinance, unfortunately, that's
Ordinance.
the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act requires approval of intergovernmental cooperation agreements by ordinance.
So this will look to see how the boundaries can be sort of developed, not synchronously, but as efficiently as possible.
Yes, and hopefully create a study plan.
Right, and then, so would you envision then that sort of what's allowed next to each other are similar in terms of what their ordinances allow eventually in the zone?
That's what we would envision. But if we are awarded the grant, then both the borough and the township will have to work together to determine what we want to see in those areas.
Okay, and does it change any of the land use requirements of the township?
No, not during the process.
Okay, thanks.
And the other thing I wanted to announce is that the four-way stops are up at McFarland and Hillendale and Byard and Hillendale. There are also warning stop signs, which are 260 feet, 200 feet ahead, with flashers. So we did send out a mass email. Hopefully everybody's starting to pay attention to them and stopping at the intersections.
Is 30 days going to be enough? Or?
If we don't notice that people are starting to stop and slow down, we'll leave it up longer.
Do you have any more flashers, Roger? Do you have any more flashers to put up? People aren't stopping?
They're not stopping?
I don't know.
They're learning.
They're learning? All right.
Yeah.
But,
If people in the audience did not receive that email regarding the new stop signs, please speak to Lisa, because she has a database of emails for residents, and she's used sorry. And she's used it to notify residents of any number of different things, such as how the power outages are going and weather crises that are forecast, and most recently, as far as I can recall, is the fact that there are flashers and stop signs. If you aren't on that email list, you're missing a very important aspect of communication within the township. So please let Lisa know what your email is so that she can add it to the mailing, and then you'll get those notices.
You can also sign up on the website. On the home page at the bottom, it says subscribe here. You can sign up right there as well. That's all I have.
Thanks.
Anybody have any questions for Lisa on any of the aspects that she's brought to our attention? Chief, I think you're next.
Okay, the report for January 2015. There were 183 incidents in the township requiring police services. This includes all the incidents responded to by the township police and the state police that were dispatched through the Chester County Police Radio and the 911 call taker station. And during January, there were 5 house burglaries that occurred. 3 are being investigated by the township police, 2 the state police are the primary investigators. They're all being coordinated with other departments in the Kennett Square, southern Chester County area, and Newcastle County, who also experienced burglaries, an increase in burglaries in December and January. Due to the bad weather, the number of accident reports may be up this month. We don't get all the accident information until probably about this time in February. The total number won't be available, but accidents during the early part of January, the 3 storms, the 6th, the 8th, the 12th, were high in a single day. We had 5 in an hour and a half. The road crews were out early, but the timing of the day and the timing of the storm hit affects their operations. This was in the January 8th storm mostly, and the road crews have hit it pretty good. And this past storm of the weekend, there were no accidents at all. There were 2 major house fires in the township this month. One on Red Creek Drive occurred at 5:50 a.m. That was on January 8th. The fire crews responding were hampered by no hydrants in that development. This is the Fallbrook development. Water had to be tanked in 7-degree temperatures and 12-mile-an-hour winds. That hampered the trucks carrying the water. Our roadmaster, previous volunteer fireman, recognized the icy conditions that were going to be caused by the water being spilled out of the trucks. He had salting crews out as soon as the first fire companies responded. This was in close proximity to the 5 Points intersection during the rush hour, coupled with the school traffic, and so the traffic had to be controlled by hand. Tanker trucks from as far away as Lancaster County were part of this tanker task force, which involved 15 tanker fire trucks. The fire is still under investigation by the county fire marshals. In the 31st, 800 block of East Hillendale Road, near the intersection of Creek and Hillendale Roads, occurred on January 31st, Saturday, at approximately 1 p.m. Water once again had to be trucked into the scene of the fire. Again, our roadmaster responded to deal with the icy road surfaces. This house fire was located on a hillside, which causes the area surrounding the fire to be very slippery and had to be treated with salt. The salting that Roger did aided the fire crews in fighting this fire. Both fires were fully involved when the firemen first arrived, and both the buildings are still standing, which says something to fire operations. Narcan, an antidote used for heroin and cocaine overdoses, which was brought up by a township resident as to why it was not administered by police and emergency crews in this area. At the time, there was no law in Pennsylvania that exempted first responders from liability. Since then, Senate Bill 1164, introduced by Senator Pileggi, supported by amendments from Representative Denneman and Rafferty, was passed in 2014. The bill required training to be developed for first responders before the exemption would apply. Good Fellowship Ambulance in Westchester, in conjunction with the Chester County Hospital, developed this training, which will be available to Township Police in February. Two other things I'd like to note. One is Tom Glass was named by the county commissioners today as the Deputy Director of Emergency Management. I mentioned Tom because he started out in 1974 as a volunteer fireman with the Kennett Fire Company. He was hired as a fire EMS dispatcher, where he rose to the rank of a shift supervisor. In 1990, he started to serve as the hazardous material response team. And during that time, Tom was instrumental in the startup of the response team. And by his peers, he was elected deputy chief before taking on chief in 2000. During this time with the Department of Emergency Services, Tom served as chairman of the Hazmat Subcommittee for Southeast Pennsylvania, the regional task force. It's a pretty good accomplishment for a local resident who served Kennett Township well in the response out of Kennett Fire Company. And I just thought I should mention it to the board. The other thing I want to mention is we get these emergency weather reports. They're saying 15 below this weekend. That's something that hampers anybody who works outside, especially our road crew and the first responders. Thank you.
Chief, I just wanted to, one of the things that you didn't mention, I don't think, I just wanted to call to the attention of the group. The graph that was sent out, the question has come up, how much does the township manage and how much does the state police manage? And for January, if I read this correctly, 84 calls were handled by the township and 92 calls were handled by the state police relating to the township. Does that sound right?
That sounds about right. I checked in December, and I think we handled 64% of them, but the number will vary depending on the time of the day they're received. We try to have somebody on every day, and we try to opposite the hours. We'll start at 6 a.m. and go to midday, and then we'll have midday to probably about 10 or 11, depending on what's occurring, because there are things township residents want to contact us about, so that's the way we set that up. There are a few days that there's nobody out there, including weekends, which will vary, just to give you as much service as we can out of 2 people.
Right, of course. Good.
On the burglaries, is there any patterns or clues that residents should be aware of that might help you all?
Well, there's 2 separate patterns. I can't go into too much detail about them, but I always recommend making your house look occupied, because that seems to be something that's involved in burglaries in the whole area, where they check your house to see if it's unoccupied. 3 of these were what we call smash and grab. You'll go to detect to see if somebody's in the house. You'll kick a door in or a window in. You'll run up to usually the master bedroom, take a pillowcase, dump the jewelry drawer, and seize all the jewelry.
And it's day, night, doesn't matter?
Well, these have been either day or evening hours. There's not been any overnight. And again, we can't detect exactly when they occur because people come home to discover it. Some people have come home at 10 o'clock at night, but they really can't tell when they did occur. Now, this seemed to have started in Newcastle County, I'm going to say about late fall, and then we noticed a pattern there. But there are some that are committed, they know exactly what they're looking at, and they look at a pattern as to when the occupants may leave, and we recommend put your alarm on. There was a fear some time ago where people will be concerned about fine for false alarms. I'm not that concerned about that because alarm's important. Now, if you have an alarm that's going off 3 times in 2 weeks, then that's what that ordinance is actually for. If you have an alarm and don't use it, it
And
doesn't
even
help
during
us
the
at all.
day running out for errands?
Yes, yes. They're watching, they also watch the police, but they're watching your activities. And we've seen people in the township that we drew attention. We had one that was chased out of Byard Estates, and I mean chased. We didn't know what they were doing, but they turned around abruptly. We knew they turned around abruptly. They went out the back of Byard Estates, and they got onto McFarland Road, then on Hillendale, and down to Delaware 7 at a very high rate, so we feel that somehow they are connected. That's something you also want to watch. And don't fear calling the police. If you see something suspicious, this morning we had a car sitting in a cul-de-sac. It had been there for probably about 40 minutes before somebody called. But that's something important we want to look at. We want to find out who they are and what they're doing there and why they're there. This turned out to be legitimate, but still, that's what police are here for.
Thanks.
Are there any questions for the chief as to his report? Thanks, Chief. Next item of business is Ordinance 231, Hazel Avenue, ROW.
Okay. This ordinance is to vacate a portion of Hazel Avenue, and it's subject to and reserving to the township a permanent utility easement previously declared and established in Hazel Avenue. The township owns a small portion of Hazel Avenue, which is located between the Blevins Tract, which you all saw earlier, and Hazel Avenue, which is in the borough. It's a very small piece of property that's a public right-of-way. The township has decided to vacate that public right-of-way to the adjoining property owners. And we did in December place a 20-foot wide utility easement on that property so that the Blevins Tract could, if it's developed, connect to sewer and water through that property, because that is the closest connection. So this ordinance would vacate the right-of-way to the property owners at parcel 3-1-7, which is a borough parcel, and 62-3-53. Each property owner would get 22 and a half feet of property, which would be added to their parcels.
So we need a motion to
Yes.
Enact the ordinance.
I'll move to enact.
Enact.
There you go. Ordinance 231.
I will second it. Is there any discussion?
So is it any trail going through, since we just heard about trails? Is there a trail easement?
No, because the development that it connects to does not even have sidewalks and the roads are narrow.
So there's no reason for one. Okay, thanks.
Is there Any discussion from residents?
Yes. I have a concern for the safety of my family.
Excuse me, identify yourself, please, for the record.
Right. Jason Nichols, I live at 563 Hazel. I have a concern for the safety of my family, for the problems we had with our neighbor next door, that you're splitting with Mr. Kaiser, that you're splitting it in half. I've taken care of that property since I've been there. It's clearly right in front of my house. His house is facing towards, what is it, Young Avenue? And for some reason, he always wants to come over and harass us for some reason. We've had problems since we've been there. It has caused a lot of stress on my family.
One at a time, please. I can't.
It's caused a lot of stress on my family. I would prefer that, since you're... No, well, I know, but I would prefer just giving it to us. I've always taken care of it, picked the branches up, cut the lawn and everything from since I've been there.
Legally, if we vacate a property, it has to be divided equally among the two property owners.
Is that how it goes?
Yeah, if there are different property owners on each side of the area being vacated, each of those property owners owns the portion of the road being vacated up to the center line. So if your property's on one side of the road, we can't, as a township, if we vacate the road, give you ownership on the other side of the center line if somebody else owns property on that side. By law, when you vacate, each side of the road goes to the abutting owner to the middle, to the center line of the road.
Can I ask a question? You guys say you zone it, right?
Pardon me?
You zone that?
Zone it?
Own it.
Oh, own it?
Yes.
Oh, do we own it?
Yeah.
Well, we own it, the township owns the road now, but by this ordinance, they're seeking to not own the road anymore and allow the property owners on either side to own the road up to the center line.
But we will own an easement for utilities.
That's already been declared that runs through there, so the vacation is subject to the right of the township to enter onto the center 20 feet of the road to do any work on any utilities that run under the ground.
I understand that. I was just concerned for the safety of my family. It's only a small portion from the road over, and it's only a small block, and like I said, I've always taken care of it. There's 2 trees on it, and the rest of it I've always cut and took care of. I'm very concerned with the safety of my family.
Well, the safety of your family is an issue that's not going to be solved by vacating or not vacating the road. The safety of your family is going to be solved by if you have a complaint that somebody is harassing you, if you have a trespass complaint or something, you call the police.
Well, that's what it has already been with the neighbor.
Okay,
That's
but
what we're trying to
we
say.
can't solve a neighbor versus neighbor issue
Right.
up here as the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors is just considering what it wants to do with the actual road itself.
Right, okay.
And you'll own up to the center line of the road on your side, and I assume Mr. Kaiser will own up to the center line of the road on his side.
Right.
And that's your property.
Can I
And
just...
that's you can't trespass, if he comes over the center line of the road, technically, that's trespass. It's no longer a public road.
Right.
And there are legal remedies for the issue that you're raising.
Right.
So you should look into that if the problem continues.
We have been for 12 years.
But we can't solve that for you. It's a private resident versus resident matter.
Yeah,
This is from 2008,
Okay?
from Kennett Township.
And what is that?
It says Kennett Township does not own the right-of-way between the reference properties. Therefore, we do not have any position on the matter as to the maintenance of the right-of-way as far as plantings or mowings, as long as there are no permanent structures in the way in case of need for future access.
Right, and since then, it's been researched, and the township, this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
The reason we're vacating is to try to solve a lot, the township doesn't maintain that, you do. We have been dealing with this issue between the neighbors for a long time. We're trying to solve the issue because the issue is that one says the other one shouldn't be on the property, and we deal with it a lot. So
No,
we're
and
trying
I
to
feel
solve
that-
it, because now you have the right to put a fence up the middle of the property if you want.
Yeah, and this is my thing, like.
And
it's-
since that
It's
letter-
not solving it, because what it's gonna do is it's just gonna occur more. And I feel like if you guys split it between all of us, it's gonna give him the right to come over even more. So then, who?
Well, it gives them actually the right to come over even less.
Yes, because
now you have the center line of the road as the dividing line between
Right.
the two properties. Before, he could come across the center line because it was a public road.
Right, so what we
Now,
have
the
to-
center line
Is
into
yours.
your side is yours.
And on the front porch.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. like-
That's, but these guys can't deal
Right,
with
they're, I see what
that.
you're saying.
You're
They're
saying
saying
That's a
They're
trespass,
they're
it may be a
opening up
civil,
to
you may have a
But that's
civil
what I mean, it's been
action,
civil
you may have a
trespassing
criminal
and-
right of action, you call the police, you talk to a lawyer, that's something that this Board of Supervisors can help you with. But know that this action actually demarcates a center line of the road that is yours on one side and his on the other.
And you have the right to mark that, your property now.
Right.
Before,
It's your
you didn't
property.
have the right because it came right up close to your house. Now, it's the center of the property, and you have the right to mark that center of that property. You can put a fence right on your property line.
Alright.
It's your property.
I got you. And then, if they decide to put a path on, it goes on that side.
Well,
Well, remember,
Okay.
this is all subject to that 20-foot
We're not gonna
easement.
say-
So you're not going to put a fence on the middle, because the 20-foot easement runs down the middle of the road, but you could come in 20 feet off the center line and put a fence.
Well, how much room on either side for an easement would I need? I mean, what's the required amount? Say it's in the center, what would be the required amount on both sides for the piping?
Well, 20 feet, I mean, the easement's 20 feet wide, so you go to the center line, and it's
Does
10
that
feet on your
measure?
side,
Okay,
10 feet on his side.
Okay.
Right? Isn't that the easement?
it is, but,
Right down the middle?
yeah, I mean,
See, but that,
10 feet on
that's
either
for
side of the
sewage
center
and
line.
everything?
that, yes.
So that, yeah.
Yeah, utilities.
That's,
Well,
Water
there's
and sewer.
already, there is already a gas line that runs through the trees and everything as well, so
Right.
it's
So my
already been
question
started.
is, like, right now, before you make an okay on that, like, can we do what we have to do? Like, so there is no more,
Can we
We're
finish this up
concerned.
after the meeting?
yeah, that's fine.
Because of this, you're asking for very detailed questions, which, we really have an agenda we have to get through.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
But I'll be here, Dave will be here, we'll be happy to talk through what needs to happen. Mr. Kaiser's here, maybe we can all three groups of us talk and figure out a way so we don't have this problem in the future.
Okay. That's that's my main concern. I just want it, like I've told you, I just want this all to stop and end. And every year it's worse and worse and worse.
and that's our main concern for both properties. We just want, that's why we are vacating this, so that this is no longer public property, because quite frankly, it doesn't have, we don't have any use for this property.
Right.
You know, anyway, if we were going to make a road through there, we wouldn't do this,
Right.
but that's not going to happen.
Right. Okay.
Is there any further discussion? There is, okay.
I have a general question. My name's Jessica Casson. I live on Hazel Avenue as well. So by doing this, and based on the ordinance that you just passed with the Blevins tract, you've given yourselves an ability to leverage the utilities there, but now that they own the road, is there an ability to take that back to put a throughway through there? I mean, you just said you're not planning to put a road through there, but I mean, as a resident of Hazel, my concern with potential development up there is that
The borough does not want us to put a road through there and allow that development. It's already been discussed with the borough. That development, as you know, has narrow streets, there's no sidewalks, and so we would not, first of all, we'd have to do a traffic study to put a development through there, and it wouldn't pass. So that's why we will not put a street through there.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And I vote in favor as well, so it passes. That takes us to new business. Do we have a motion to pay the bills?
I'd like to move to pay the bills. Sorry, usually it's the other guy.
I will second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Roger. Roger's going to read his road report.
I'll keep mine short and sweet. This month is kind of been a routine winter month of snow and ice control. Storms this month, we haven't had much snow, but plenty of trips out salting. Freezing rain is much harder to control than the snow is. We're using more material this year than we have in the last 2 years probably. Doesn't make much sense, but freezing rain just keeps piling right up on top of it, so we're trying to keep it under control. We're going to have a little more sweeping to do this spring, but cleaning up after the storms takes a lot of time out of our regular schedule. After every storm, you go over our equipment, wash it up, repair, even though it's all good in shape and stuff, there's always little stuff that goes on, hoses and cutting edges and stuff like that. So that's usually a good day and a half just going through the equipment that's been out. So days it's not snowing, we've been trimming. We're trying to catch up. We're way behind on trimming, but we've had about 4 subdivisions done on Sills Mill Road this year so far. Half of Hillendale Road. We need about 3 months worth of good weather just to get caught up here, but we're trying to work through the chaos that goes on every day. But in between the rainstorms and the trimming, we're doing potholes that are popping up everywhere. We're getting a lot of raveling going on, which isn't really a pothole, it's just the blacktop's just falling away. If you noticed a lot on the state roads it's happening, it's the new PennDOT mix that they went to a few years ago. That was a good idea, but you can't keep up with it. So it's wet days, you can't really put cold patch in it because there's not a hole, and trying to get the tar pot out to do a little work, but when it's wet we can't use it. So if you got any concerns or don't hesitate to call with a pothole location or something. We try to keep up on it best we can. But Lisa's already brought up about my 4-way stop signs. They were put up, the ordinance was passed. Those have plenty of signage. There's lots of warnings, and it's kind of comical actually if you stop and just watch. Even though there's stop signs, I have to tell everybody to really do a double check because it's the people you don't even think that drive through it every day. New speed limit signs were installed on the old Baltimore Pike coming in off the bypass. We took that over from PennDOT because we dropped it below 40 mile an hour. PennDOT did the study, proved it. We installed the signs. We have to maintain the signs into the borough. I don't know if the chief, there's a time restriction, I think, before you can start enforcing.
15 days. 15 days.
So
we're about at that, but we noticed some drop down. We did the study, PennDOT did their own study to verify errors. They went along with it right away. So we have noticed some reduction.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of unhappy people.
Are there signs warning that,
There's a reduced 30 ahead coming in off the bypass that PennDOT recommended. It's a big 4-foot sign. If anybody messed
people are
it up.
going too fast to see it probably?
Yeah. One of the other questions that was brought up a while ago, I think Lisa had called me about it, was that there's no identification sign coming in off of Route 1 into Kennett. That's
Right.
the first exit, that is a Kennett exit. We have, I didn't pick up on it, yes, I've been here too long, but I've contacted PennDOT. I haven't really got a good answer for it yet, but we're trying to find out why there isn't a Kennett sign.
It used to be there.
But we're working on that, so hopefully someday there's a new sign that says Kennett Square. Street lights, we've had several issues with street lights, and residents have been calling, which that's great. We don't get to go around every night to see them. For some reason, we had trouble with PICO feeding, so we worked with PICO trying to get power fed back to them. So that was corrected last month, and they've called the residents back that had called it in, and we've got that under control now. Crack sealing, we've done a couple days of crack sealing, but we need a lot more. But I called Weaver's Mulch, which handles our brush pile at the garage. I don't know if everybody's been to the garage. We have a huge pile. Part of it's still from last year because he couldn't grind it all when he was here last year. He contacted me and he was hoping to come in end of next week to grind the pile, so we'll have a nice clear field to start the spring out. And last year when we ground it, we got 510 ton of mulch, which Weaver's mulch takes for grinding it. It's a good workout. So hopefully we can continue that use, because paying somebody to come in to grind that is going to be a big expense if we have to go that route. But it seems to be working well. Wood chips, that's a good spring job. We have a good pile already started. A lot of residents are taking advantage of that. The recycled asphalt that we had, we're out of. They've taken use of that. That'll be coming back again in the spring when we get some back. So I think it's a pretty good program. Hopefully everybody enjoys it, and I think if it comes from the township, you'll be able to get some of it back sometime. So, but everything else is running normal for us. So, yes, Carol.
Since you installed the dusk to dawn electronic gate, have you had any more incidents at the yard?
Just with the gate. I had more trouble with the gate freezing up than anything else. So.
Oh, that's nice.
But no, we only had a couple incidents really where the kids were joyriding around doing donuts in the field at nighttime. Other little incidents that we get, people drop stuff off, our cameras pick that up, and the chief handles that. They're always surprised when they get the phone call, I think, that they don't know how they got it. After they pass 10 signs that say there's cameras here, don't drop stuff off, but it does work. So but we haven't had any, knock on wood, we haven't had anything bad happen around there. So
Good. And the trimming you mentioned, Roger, are you trimming trees to get the branches away from pico lines?
no, we're trimming trees to keep that are encroaching the road for running mirrors, and when the roads that we're going to be paving or chipping or whatever, seal coating, we are trying to get elevated enough so when trucks come down, they won't break them off. And,
I see.
the subdivisions are worse because the plantings of the new trees when they build a subdivision are great when they're small, but they're just not planning ahead of future use. So, and most of the homeowner associations work very well with us. We try to approach them with letters before we trim. We'll meet with them before or after, and that's worked out well. But
so you'll come in and trim our trees for free?
But we'll go by and tell you which ones need done. But
I've also noticed that you're replacing some of the wood signs with high visibility signs.
We are.
Can you remind people while you're doing that?
We are still in the process of upgrading. It was a standard where you had a deadline at first when they started it, and then nobody can meet the deadline, so they just relaxed it. It's as you replace now. You're supposed to upgrade. So we're about 60% done probably. We are still working on trying to get some new signs put in. We're actually working on Woodchuck Way right now, doing a study in there. We're going to be doing some sign changing, and the wood 6x6s, most people, I get a call when we take them down that want them. They'll come by, pick them up. If they don't want them, we have some in the garage, take it to the public. So they're not in real good shape on the bottom since they're rotten out. So, but most of your subdivisions are wanting them, either the homeowners or the HOAs, or putting around gardens and that kind of stuff. But
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. You should come to every meeting.
I will.
Every single one, Roger.
Okay.
Not allowed to miss it. I assume there's no comments or questions for Roger.
Feel free.
As I recall, there is no escrow releases to be reviewed. There's no subdivisions to be reviewed, no extensions to be granted. That gets us to public comment. Does anybody have anything he or she wants to say that hasn't yet been heard? Okay, then I'll be glad to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, actually, I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Aye.
Thank you all very much for your patience.